gonna call to order the April 3rd, 2024 Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. Can we do roll call?
Of course. Committee member Knight,
Present.
committee member Kester,
Here.
committee member Harrington.
Here.
Sorry, Chair Harrington. Vice Chair Minkoff,
Here.
committee member Terrell,
Here.
committee member Barney, committee member Castillo, committee member Saxon. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. We want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, do we have any public comments on non-agenda items? Not seeing any hands raised on Zoom, and if you guys see anything and I miss it, please just let me know. Go ahead and review and approve the minutes for March 6th. Did everybody have a chance to look over those?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have one comment on the paragraph 4 discussion item. The very last sentence doesn't make sense to me. I'm not quite sure what was meant there. There was to create a graphic. Can you help us visualize the framework for the Citizen Advisory Committee?
Oh, that was,
Somebody was supposed to create.
I think it was more of a generalized suggestion to try to recreate the graphic from chapter 3, figure 2. As part of the U of O document. Basically something like that for Troutdale.
And who was gonna?
I don't think that was, I think that was and it'd be a good idea if somebody did, but I don't think that was I don't believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't believe that was intended to be a specific action item for anybody in particular.
I just wanted clarification.
At least that's my recollection of the discussion point.
So
Mr. Harrison, like minutes are very detailed and report what each person says, everything like that, and technically there are some limitations in that, although they're not like super big deal items, but it's still kind of a concern in a way, so I feel like this is much more of a summary than minutes.
Yeah.
Cause I don't wanna be like super technical about it, but I feel like it can be important regarding what a person says, like if we ever ended up in like a lawsuit, then it could be very specific as to specific words of things, stuff like that. So I think it's important to have it.
More detail.
Yeah.
Well, that calls into question the recording. Every one of these meetings is audio recorded. How does that play into minutes? I mean, they're archived, correct?
yes.
The meetings,
Mhm.
and we could have it transcribed. There are actually AI apps that do that. We don't need to take staff time to do that. But
And if memory,
I agree that these are just, it's just sort of summary notes and not really minutes. Traditional.
And if memory serves, this is the first time that meeting minutes has even come up for CAC. Historically, we've not had them.
Pretty regularly before you're gone.
That would be the difference.
We used to use this like all the time. And I do acknowledge it's our AI thing, but like I personally don't trust those to do an accurate job.
Yeah.
Yes. It's that I think since the words of time we discussed this document, it seems like it's very loose, we're just discussing stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like it's not like we were talking about books and then sort of like something and maybe that has to be more detailed. My first opinion is about some reason we're just trying to figure out what it was. Yeah, but it's, so I didn't have the issue that I thought some reason, we're just talking about this, trying to figure out a role.
But shouldn't particularly insightful things to be sharing, and even could also be good to have record of that, because I think let's remember.
So I can give a little context to this. This is something that our director has asked Chris Ann to start doing, is providing meeting minutes, because we haven't had them for quite a while. The reason to that was we thought that we were okay with the recording and having that be posted, but we do still need minutes. So Chris Ann is doing more summary based now. We are working on getting, there's discussion along with City Hall about potentially having not a service, but a new kind of software that does all the recording along with transcribing minutes. So I think until that decision is made, this is just kind of like an interim to make sure that we are still having a recorded document rather than just the recording itself. For right now. I'm not entirely sure where this will eventually go yet, but that's as far as I'm aware of.
Great, thank you. With that being said, does anybody want to make a motion to, well,
Point was brought up about a grammatical change that maybe need to be made. I might suggest that we follow through on that with that sentence before we accept them, because it is correct, it doesn't make sense. So I wasn't there, but you guys can maybe, or Adrian can possibly help put the right noun in there or adjective.
Let me,
It could almost be, so I would propose to amend this to say there was a discussion about creating a graphic to help us visualize, etc.
yeah, I think that's probably as accurate as we can make it, given a.
Move to accept the minutes with the changes.
And then to go back, I can really kind of question for you as well. But this is what I meant about there are some things that I think are missing. Well, like I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it, 'cause it's not like super more details. Like the summary of the committee comments, I think it's missing some of what I said last week, from what I recall.
Okay. We can go back through it and take a look at that.
So are you proposing that we basically table the minutes and for further looking at light by staff, or? Yeah.
Or if I may, Chris, is there anything specifically that you would like to see in there? And if so, would there be a way to put a statement that you'd like included, or is it more I'd like to see more depth in general?
And regarding my specific statement, I'd have to go review the reporting or something to remember what it was, although I think I know what it was, and I guess in my mind, minutes is supposed to be like a record of what happened at a meeting, and I like the old way that we got them a lot better, because this is like missing a lot of things, like I believe there were some insightful comments when we discussed chapter 1 through 3 of the paper we're going through and everything, like that's. a lot of that's not in here. It's got like good points, but there's still comments that could help us, things like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So are we feeling like we want to wait until next month and see if we can get more detail in these, or how's the group feeling?
I'm fine with that.
Right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Right. In favor?
I,
All right, so we are down to our discussion items. And that is reviewing chapters 4 and 5 of our University of Oregon article. And last time we were here, we had people volunteer to kind of read through this, and then as we got to places that felt like a good place to stop and discuss, we use that approach. Does that feel like a approach that still works, or do you guys have other ideas?
Zadern, my feeling, at least for chapter 4,
Mm.
is basically a lot of Oregon statutes and a lot of specifics that I shouldn't say specifics, a lot of minutia that we probably don't necessarily need to read out in detail. There are a couple points in here that I think are important discussion points for our purposes, particularly towards the end of the chapter, when it's talking about or basically sort of the high points in talking about definitions as far as land use decisions, limited land use decisions, administrative actions, and sort of the differences between those. And we can probably get some clarity from Dakota as to, as far as Troutdale's process, what the specifics are between those. Not necessarily from a state statute standpoint, but as far as Troutdale's planning process. And then the last question that came to mind to me as I was going through this is that there's a whole section about periodic review of the submitted comprehensive plans. It's supposed to happen every 4 to 10 years. Do we know when the last one was done for the city of Troutdale?
We do. The last comp plan was amended in 2014. So that I spoke with our director, that is something that we are aware of, that we need to work on updating. So that's something that we want to work on try to get to towards the end of this year and then early next year.
Okay. Because
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years.
Is the normal
yeah.
editing process.
So talking about our role, one of the things that I think would probably be a specific thing that this group would probably want some input on is any amendments to that comprehensive plan. But that's me. But yeah, in general, I don't think there's necessarily a lot in chapter 4 other than just getting clarification on some key definitions as far as Troutdale's planning process as to what some of those larger categories in practice are.
How does everybody feel? Do you guys want to dive into the chapter, or do you feel that it is kind of a lot of definitions and such? Okay, yeah,
Some of it I think would be good. I think for stage, because I. You have anything rather than just giving examples of possible scenarios.
sounds good. And then Rupert?
Yeah, so my question about chapter 4 is, do we know where Troutdale is different from chapter 4? So we can look at chapter 4 and so this way it isn't stopping. But is planning in the different areas impacted? Are they following what's in this document?
Well, and that's sort of what I was asking is because the three classifications, at least the way this is worded is, I mean, between land use, limited land use and administrative decisions, those are definitions in Oregon statute. So I would assume that that there are in the Troutdale planning process, and Dakota can definitely keep me honest here, that those classifications are parts of Troutdale's planning process, just as, I mean, those are part of the rules that come down from DLCD. Now, my assumption is that things like the things that would fall into, as an example, administrative actions are things that would be your low-level applications, your type 1, type 2 kind of applications that don't require any sort of additional committee review. They don't go in front of planning commission. So those would be, that's all administrative stuff. Now, what the difference between land use decisions and limited land use decisions, that I'm less clear on. And where that falls within Troutdale's planning process would be interesting. Now, how that translates into what we can do as a group to increase citizen involvement and information flowing back and forth to the general public is a different question entirely.
Oh,
And
yes, Kevin.
I would say related to that, Adrian, the first part of your comment, in my opinion, is not the purview of this committee. How Troutdale goes about making land use decisions is not for us to decide, it's for the planning commission to decide, and for us to maybe offer suggestion. It's also for the city council to decide based on Oregon law, which is what chapter 4 includes quite a bit. This Oregon statute 197 and so on, which you were provided through Dakota. You had the chance to take a look at that. The second part of what you said, Adrian, I agree with wholeheartedly. What our responsibility is, and I think we could easily get off the track of what we're trying to do, which again is define our role in being the mouthpiece, if you will, of the Troutdale City Council and the Planning Commission and all the other committees, for that matter, to communicate issues to the community and bring concerns and ideas from the community back to city council, planning commission, and whoever. But to try to get into the whole discussion about how we're doing land planning and land use and whether or not the land use guide is now 10 years old and it needs to be reviewed, that's a planning commission issue, not a CAC issue. What I would like to add is I think part of our discussion ought to focus on the fact that the CCI, which I have learned about from our last couple of months' discussions, which sits with the city council, they have deemed themselves to be the CCI as per this U of O document. I think we ought to discuss with city council about their divesting themselves and potentially either making this committee also CCI, or having a separate committee, which is the CCI for, just like Clackamas County, they have a precedent of having a separate and distinct committee for community involvement. And the Oregon laws talk about having a committee for community involvement separate from a CAC, but also separate from the city council, because I think that that's kind of a, what is the term? Conflict of interest. Thank you.
This is Adrian. I have to say, I read what is in the city ordinances very differently. Because the mandate of the Troutdale CAC is very explicit in that that part of our mandate is being in charge of the community involvement program. That by definition, puts us in that role. Now, city council is oversight of that, but I think, I guess to a certain extent, and I've been thinking this for a couple months, I'm wondering if we're overthinking all of this. I'm starting to really believe that we don't necessarily need to put in extremely explicit terms, like Clackamas County has done, how this body is specifically involved with the goal one items around community involvement. We know, based on the feedback from Ray Young, that the community involvement plan is our purview. We know that that feeds into all of the items in goal one, and part of that is being involved in all levels of the planning process. And we also know that through this structure that we've been going through, that every volunteer committee in this city functions as a citizen advisory committee. So we need to look at this within the context of how this works for the city of Troutdale. So we have a dual role, and that's okay. We can have a dual role of being that sort of communications oversight for staff, for city council, and for everybody else, basically, giving input on how to increase community involvement, but also keep our existing role per ordinance of looking at whatever city council decides to hand to us and whatever citizens decide to hand to us from the other end. That's already all in there. And I'm all for understanding what we can do and what we can do to increase citizen involvement, which is what this whole discussion is ultimately about. But as far as defining our role, I'm really thinking we're starting to overthink this.
Yes.
So. Yeah, I guess this is kind of like what you were saying also. I was thinking you were giving your comment of what you said, and I have here, this is a copy of the application that you fill out when you want to join a committee. And on the front, it has the list of the committees and basic descriptions of them, as well as how to qualify and all that. And granted, this is a summary for Citizens Advisory Committee. It says the CAC makes recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council on land use issues and other projects of the sound, which makes it sound like land use is really our big thing, as well as whatever else we may get. But at the same time, I guess that kind of puts us into that process. And the way I read that is that, I guess, we're giving our thoughts on something, perhaps to a citizen, if work on these things and maybe as a part of the voice of the city of the city.
Yes.
When I was reading this too, I was thinking what Kevin was saying, that I do not have an active record to understanding all the processes that the planning committee uses, and the planners as they, apply these things. So the only thing that I had written down, because I'm so confused about trying to make decisions about their process, is that asking the planning committee where they feel more citizen involvement is needed during all of these decision-making processes, and where the deficiencies may be in the process. I'm thinking sometimes if they're actively doing it, they say, hey, you know what? It'd be really nice if there was some public opinion at this point.
Yes.
Or at this point, there should be an oversight, like maybe we should get the CAC's opinion on A, B, C, or D. Do you know what I mean? So that we could be, because it said that that was per, I'm not sure which ones I'm reading now, that that the planning committee can also use us.
Mhm.
You know, so they get stuck on something or whatever. So those were my two thoughts while I'm reading this, and knowing that I am not the expert as you are, and as the planning committee has seen these over and over and have a working understanding of what's on paper and how does it apply and what are the effects. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Did I see him?
No, you first. I talk too much.
I just was gonna say, I do know that Troutdale makes great efforts on the planning commission, that their notifications are like double what they have to be. But maybe we need to make it triple, because maybe we aren't getting enough involvement, so maybe those kind of oversight. I don't think we can interfere, they've got deadlines, the planning commission. And stuff on business turned around so many days. But certainly, if there's stuff in the process to come up against more community members with issues, we want to look into happen. But maybe we need to look at increasing the notification area, or figuring out other departments that should be notified of these things. I know it costs more to do that, but if that's getting more community members involved, that's seeing that's our role. I think we can't mess with the whole planning process.
Oh, Woodrow first.
Woodrow, so that's an excellent point, Drew. It goes back to metrics. You know, what is, high level, low level community group? Right? Is it a metric that we can say, questions from the general population? Because we can track that. That's something that is a number. We can say, how many people spoke at a meeting about a certain subject? How many people attended a meeting or a discussion point or something like this? So this is something that is valuable to assessing our participation. Okay, so when we say, what's our involvement be, nobody's having questions about it, and if there's nobody speaking about it, that's unknown. That's not low interest. That's people don't know. Citizens don't know what's happening here. If we have low, some people know about it. Do we have the right people? And if there's high interest, of course, then that's maybe an effective meeting that's being used, is sending this message to those citizens. So.
Yes.
Shelby made an excellent segue into another item that I found in the big PowerPoint presentation that was in the slug of Dropbox stuff. But one of the things that was in there is that effective community involvement needs to happen more towards the beginning of the process, because once you get into land use decisions and implementations, things are on timelines. Having people come into type 3 public hearings to give their input is all well and good, and we have all of those opportunities available, and we are definitely go over and above as far as radii and such, and notifying people, setting the issues of letting the residents of the trailer of the RV park aside know what's going on, but that's being worked on. But one of the things that is suggested in the DLCD guide is to emphasize community involvement when the rules are being made rather than when the rules are being implemented. So for example, one of the places, and Planning Commission has been doing this for the last 2 or 3 months, is going through and doing a review and a retooling of definitions and tables and wording of a lot of things in the development code. Those are prime locations of places that should have, based on all of this, community involvement and community input. And those kinds of meetings that Planning Commission is now in the process of doing should be highlighted, because then the community, the public, can give their input at that stage. And that input then flows down through the rest of the process for staff planners and the implementation side of what Planning Commission and all the other committees do. And thus the community has given their input. So, and those kinds of suggestions that can be passed back and forth, and that's just one example from one committee to another. But I think all of the other committees, probably there's similar things that can be highlighted for the purposes of effective community involvement.
One of the things that came up, Diane, when you were talking for me, and I think I read it on the State of Oregon website, was that the Citizens Involvement Committee, one of the things that they're responsible for doing is also kind of doing a self-assessment. So again, kind of looking at some of those metrics. And so I wonder, since it seems if we look at our current structure right now of all of our committees, it seems like we have the CAC involved in all of that. So wondering if our current planning commission, is there a process for, like, when we do a big project and outreach from time to time, kind of looking back at how we did on community involvement and things like that?
As far as I know, we don't have kind of like a year in summary type thing. That could be, we could start doing as like, something that the committee wants to do once a year, kind of like a year in summary of like, hey, this is what we did. These are the outreach programs or like the outreach that we did. I think most of that, like whenever there is something that requires public outreach as far as planning goes, maybe it's a comp plan, maybe it's a housing needs analysis, economic analysis, like that's when we do a lot more public outreach, TSP, stuff like that. But that's just like requirements of the planning themselves. So if it's something that the CSC is interested in, I don't think we currently have something like that.
The other cool thing that I saw was there's actually an award out there that you can earn, cities can earn for doing an excellent job with that. So
Yep.
I mean, who doesn't want?
Something, a couple other thoughts that I had. I was looking again at this paper, and in reading it a little further, it almost also sounds like this committee is at least partially a catch-all, because in reading the description of each committee, they all say this committee does this, but ours is the only one that says our committee does this plus whatever else is assigned. It's the only one with that language. So that's also something interesting I noticed. And then one question that I wanted to ask, that I was thinking about, that I guess what prompted me was when like Adrian was asking, like, if we're overthinking this, So I guess we should go back and like, what is the root issue of why we're getting into all this stuff? Because as I recall, I think part of what spurred this on is in the months leading up to the start of this discussion. There was a situation where we were like skipping meetings almost every other month and not really having anything, so we just weren't having stuff to do.
Yeah.
And that was part of the issue.
Well, there was two things, at least to my recollection. One is we didn't have a whole lot to do, or there was the perception that we didn't have a whole lot to do. But then there was I think the thing that started the avalanche was the issue that Paul Wilcox brought to us and eventually to city council about his concerns over the way council vacancies were filled. And then there was the question of, can we, as a CAC, take that from the citizenry and go to council with it? Since then, I believe that question is answered is yes, we can. So, and then in answering that question, that's where Ray Young came in and opened up the rabbit hole of all of this other goal one stuff. And we sort of dove into that head first. And that's okay. And it's certainly given us some lively discussion in the meantime. But I guess my thought is what can we action in the short term and in sort of a generalized sense, and I know that's sort of a mutually exclusive term, saying having actionable things in a general sense, but roll with me for a moment. What can we do to just to kind of get some visibility of some things that we can do to increase citizen involvement as a city, as a collection of citizen advisory committees for the city of Troutdale, to increase citizen participation in land use planning, which is what all of this seems to be centered around.
Bill.
Yeah, this is great discussion. I've heard a lot of really good points, and if I could maybe try to take a stab at kind of lassoing it all together and maybe rub it in there with a little bit of my own input. But I think kind of from what I'm hearing is we have some frameworks in place with our different quote unquote CACs. Kind of good with that. Don't want to overthink it too much with trying to change too much stuff around. Don't necessarily want to dive too deep into the planning stuff, but want to have a general understanding of how the communication goes and what the effects of that are.
And where we can.
And where we can help, yeah, get better and help improve that process. Is it possible, I think kind of like what you were saying, trying to divest that and bring that in? How do we create a system here where we are the oversight for that? We compile all the ways that we outreach in the city. We look at it compared to state law and what timelines we have. Is there any changes that we want to make? Is it appropriate levels? Do we need to be doing more? What are some metrics, like Woodrow said, that we can compile? How many emails are being sent out on the email list for our meetings, other meetings? How do we expand that? How do we expand that email outreach? How do we look at what planning is doing? Is it sufficient? Is it not? Maybe we have a periodic review where this group then, after we compiled it, organized it, understood it, makes recommendations for improvement, changes, and so on. And then we have what we consider a community involvement program that we are regularly looking at, updating, and collecting data from to understand whether we're trending up or trending down in our pursuits. Then, in addition, we also want to update our language of how we are perceived in the code and make sure that although it was kind of told us yes, but we actually have it in writing that we are responsible for what the citizens bring to us, and also us being able to have a mechanism to whereby we can have council look at something that we think is important and not have it, we'll deal with that later. It's important, we'll look at it. So I guess maybe that would be my potential suggestion or idea to kind of like throw out there, that we maybe really dive into that community involvement, how that works, understanding it. Taking ownership of it, improving it, updating it, and, reviewing it, but at the same time strengthening the language so that we can take stuff to the council as well.
This is Diane. I agree with Will that sounds like a really good outline and action plan. And also, just like I was talking about in planning, when you have several different planners, they all have different experiences, like, on the planning committee. And so somebody might perceive something that would be helpful, but another might not, we may not be able to glean from. And the thing is, like we were talking about, what if, like, on the Facebook, it said like, planning committee, this is your last opportunity for discussion on, and then there it is. So people go, well, I didn't know, and then it's like, it's too late, or they go to, have a thought complaint with the council. Well, there was already a process. So, so there might be highlights like that, or even the Parks Committee. Today, we do our final discussion in our dog recommendation for all city parks or whatever. So besides just putting the, I don't know, on the Facebook, when it's per committee, is there a whole, minutes, like the meeting?
The agenda,
You want to post it?
I don't
Not
think
on-
so
not
for
on Facebook.
Facebook. It's just on the city website.
Okay, see, so
Yeah.
that's something that, like, let's say there's something, and we could just yellow, we could put it in yellow, put the whole thing in there. When it comes to something that, okay, final decision time, this is your opportunity to speak. So we're helping we'd be helping the community in, if they choose to, participate in comment time, which allows them to, like, oh, your time to comment was too late, you don't want any decision. And I've seen that happen with different important, subject matter. So, anyway, that might be something like, that's kind of where I was going with that.
About updating, improving our current.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
Getting a good baseline of everything
Right.
and then figuring out like what our priorities are.
Yeah, but they might have some input on that as well. That's what I'm thinking. They might, them doing it will have some ideas where's a good time to, that's a critical point to let the public know. But I do want to say that I'm liking the videos when I did pull up the CAC. That was really nice. That it was just the video of the last meeting. That was very, very cool. And I think that's awesome to, whoever came up with that idea to let the public know.
It's great. I didn't see whose hand up. was
yeah,
it?
you go first. He said I talk too much.
Very
What's that?
So, Diane, when I hear what you're saying, I take this back to my experience back in the hospital healthcare. And what I was its program, right? So each initiative, each little piece of work that comes through, you get a plan exception or definition or a request for building code change. That is an initiative or a project. There's a beginning and an end, and there's phases in it that we need public input on. But what we're looking for is program. We're looking for the overall scheme of things as it's occurring. And again, it goes back to how we track our metrics differently from an initiative, where this one item fits in between the different areas and where it fits in for the entire, I guess, department, like planning department. But then there might be another one for another department. Maybe there's a different one for Parks and Rec. But again, it's program management is how things are working at a higher level than each initiative. Metrics are different when we talk about program management. It's not crazy different, but again, you plan a little bit differently because you want to see a different set of information in the dashboard, not just the release data, right? So you want to see how things are looking over multiple initiatives and be able to track that and see that they're on track. Using color codes, if this is getting close to the end, it's getting closer to completion, and there's a different color for that as well too. So my 2 cents is from what I recognize from other world.
So I had written some things down this morning of things that I guess in an ideal world, what I thought would be helpful as first steps. And basically the top of that list would be having maybe twice a year with each of the kind of concerned groups, have a review session with CAC collectively or representatives from CAC to say, for example, have a report from staff on what is in general, the communications plan for the planning department or just city staff as a whole, which would cover things like the Facebook posts and the champion and the website, and what are all of what are the processes and procedures that you use to determine what gets posted where and how often? Because I know things have been changing lately. There's been some good things happening. So those are things that knowing about some of those changes would probably short circuit some of the improvements that we would probably suggest. But then also, and this is possibly having a representative from CAC or two, getting on the agenda of some of the other committees and basically asking them directly, how do you feel about your current citizen involvement? What are some things that we could do to help? What are some of the things that you have coming up in the next 6 months that you think might need some additional volume? And we would catch some and be able to bring some of those things up, make suggestions as to, okay, you're working on this. Right now it's being handled kind of low key, but we kind of think that that's something that should be amped up a little bit and get some more community involvement, stuff like that. And then possibly have like an annual or maybe twice annual, organize a town hall and really get direct and advertise it heavily and really get direct citizen involvement, and then take the outcome after we do some internal discussions, take the outcome of that town hall and present that along with the rest of our findings from talking to staff and all of the other committees, and take that whole grand citizen involvement report and take that to council.
I just think that a lot of times committees don't know what's going to be on the next 6 months.
And I totally accept that. I totally accept that.
And I do believe every single committee, I guess, speak for the one I want to. Eventually, would love to see more citizen involvement. We'll probably show up in the meeting and letting know that, this is the issue and we'd love for you to look into this. So I think it would be, I think any one of the committees would love to see us figure out ways to help them promote and get other people involved. I just think that they all.
Yeah.
And so the problem, they might have some ideas, right, but I think a lot of them would be looking to shoot. We love it. Besides the committees themselves. I would talk to people about getting involved. Even the people I don't question, you tell them, you should get involved. So, my 2 cents.
And then,
Yeah, I haven't been following the way you're able to see the council meetings anymore or any of the meetings. Do you know if the planning meeting is still, East Metro Media, are they still putting that on live stream?
I saw it the other day.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, and then the council meeting, is East Metro Media doing that live as well?
Mhm.
So that's still on, okay.
Yeah.
That's still on. Okay, so as we continue with our action plans, what we could also do is like, let's say the head of the planning committee would say, I know what's coming up for the next month. So you put a little blurb, approve it to whoever's doing Facebook or you, but the head planner or whatever. Is this appropriate? These are some top discussions we're having coming up in the next few months or whatever. So eventually, things can be placed upon the radar. So you get the head of the plant, the parks committee. And then that way, we just, figure out a time, like how often to put that up. So we, you know what I mean? So that we can figure those ways out, so that people know what's going on.
Yes, it will.
No, these are all great ideas, and I think that it sounds to me like we're getting some excitement about wanting to take ownership of it. Should we try to, if we're all excited about wanting to take that on, should we try to kind of corral ourselves into deciding if we want to take that on, and then, what that might look like? I mean, are we at that point that like we want to try to kind of create a framework or a definition for what we want, and like what we see is like our role, and then try to keep working on finding the words to do that, and at the same time then creating space to plan and come up, have a planning session and throw all those ideas down and kind of work that, because I feel like that's maybe a little bit down the line.
Yeah, I think we have some great ideas, and Kevin, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. This is Kevin. In line with dovetailing on your suggestion about the definition, which is kind of the initial reason for having this kind of discussion, is to get a better idea of what it is we're all here to do. I found something very interesting, and actually it's a couple of definitions in a publication of the Oregon Statewide Planning Goals and Guidelines, July 2019. That's not a document I had previously. This causes me to amend my previous statement related to what Adrian had said, because here is what they define, how they define the CAC and the CCI. And I think it may very well help us to adopt, maybe we'll adopt this as our definition. And it says, the Citizen Advisory Committee, a group of citizens organized to help develop and maintain a comprehensive plan and its land use regulations. Local governments usually establish one such group for each neighborhood in a city or each district in a county. CACs may also be known as neighborhood planning organizations, area advisory committees, or other local terms. CACs convey their advice and concerns on planning issues to the planning commission or governing body. CACs also convey information from local officials to neighborhood and district residents. It goes on to define the Committee for Citizen Involvement, CCI, a local group appointed by a governing body for these purposes, assisting the governing body with the development of a program that promotes and enhances citizen involvement in land use planning, assisting in the implementation of the citizen involvement program, and evaluating the process being used for citizen involvement. A CCI differs from a citizen advisory committee in that the former, the CCI, advises the local government only on matters pertaining to citizen involvement and goal 1. A CAC, on the other hand, may deal with a broad range of planning and land use issues. Each city or county has only one CCI, whereas there may be several CACs. Now that completely flips on its head what I originally thought was the difference between the CAC and the CCI, 180 degrees. So in fact, according to the state of Oregon, this committee actually is responsible for the land use planning guide.
Mhm.
Which,
Well, as are a number of other committees, I mean, depending on the specific purview. I mean, things get rearranged a bit and there's nothing wrong with having multiple roles, at least as far as I see it. Sorry, Will.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy you found that, and it kind of continues to kind of tease out a little bit more the thread that we're trying to find. I think, trying to fit that definition into what Troutdale has, possibly kind of along the lines of what Adrian said, where they're kind of split up, but it's interesting, there is, in my opinion, I kind of thought planning commission and the citizen involvement or the CAC for that was through planning commission. But I'd be open for discussion of whether or not we feel that that's appropriate, or if it's enough, or if a really strong CCI that we take that role on as the CCI and implementing the program, if that's enough of public involvement through our efforts to get people to those meetings, and if we feel that's appropriate enough. But the thing that catches me up there is, how much a specific citizen involved committee that just does planning stuff, how important that would be in this process, whether or not, if there's a way to take what we're doing and then maybe in low level, high level, sort of like what Joe was again saying, like that metric, when it's triggered for us to then get involved. But again, I don't have a clear opinion on that particular thing, but at least that CCI portion might be something that I would consider that we would take on, and then from there, the specific land use portions. It's tough because I think this was brought up in the last meeting that there may be certain pockets in the neighborhood, but we're not really set up to have this part of Clackamas County and that part of Clackamas County and this and this. It's just maybe we're not set up or big enough or organized enough.
Yeah.
To have that.
We're
So
not,
maybe we
because
do kind of need to have a hybrid of that. But that would be my question, is where is that specific, and if planning commission we feel sufficient with a strong CCI or not? And I don't have an opinion at this point on that.
Yeah. Well, I want to be cognizant of time. We're getting to about 8:30. And I know we had talked a little bit about kind of where we are with this and kind of maybe where we want to go with next steps to kind of build on this conversation we've had. I feel the first couple chapters in this were super helpful. Do we want to maybe commit to finishing it over the next meeting and come back, and anything that stands out to us, maybe discuss it and then talk about what might be helpful, other information we need to further our discussion? Would it be helpful to have somebody present from the planning commission so we could better understand what kind of their formation and foundation and what they do? Or do you guys feel like we have a really good, I don't feel like I know what happens there, but can you do it in some?
Or should we just call random people in planning and someone?
You can call me anytime.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was kind of shooting for is getting some procedural exchange of information between this group and staff and planning and possibly the other committees too. I mean, parks and PSEC, and I guess TCAB and city council too, for that matter. I mean, well, although we've had our lengthy discussion with Ray Young, which is how that would probably manifest. But just getting an idea is, to a certain extent, I mean, what sort of suggestions we might make for increasing citizen involvement does kind of need to be informed by how does the process work today. And I think a lot of us, because of various committees that some of us are on and our daily jobs, looking at Dakota, we have pieces of the puzzle as to how it all works. And it might be a good idea to start gathering different perspectives from different parts of that process and different parts of the larger organization, so that we can kind of coalesce those and start making those suggestions. But to Will's point, as far as starting to put some of that, we can also start putting some verbiage down on paper and basically, saying what would be our 5 bullet points as far as our high level 10,000 foot view. This is what we do, to clarify the language that's in our founding ordinance. I think both of those are things that we can probably start doing. Chapter 5 and 6, by the way, do have some fantastic information and very nice suggestions for specific things, because it does talk about things like time constraints on communication, and that it takes a lot. Staffing, it takes a lot. What are some things that you deal with apathy in the general public? Because there's a lot. We know that just from our response levels to the various surveys that go out on various things, like the parks survey. I think that's one of some of the whinging that was done about the whole dog decision was that of the relatively small, despite the fact that it was, in historical terms, as I understand, a very well responded survey, but relative to the general size of the general public, it was a very small response sample size. So dealing with things like that, there's some interesting stuff in here and it would probably be worth a look. But I think we can do that in parallel with putting some bullet points on paper and starting to gather some procedural information from the rest of the larger city organization.
Yeah, I agree that last chapter is kind of feels like when we're ready to take action, and have some good information to reflect on there. So what are people feeling like would be an effective kind of next steps or something that we want to do next meeting? Yes.
Maybe I'll throw it out there to the group, and maybe it's just me trying to feel like, hey, we accomplished something, or it's the way my brain works, but maybe the question for us, and it sounds like we're kind of leaning this direction, we could put a check by it and add it to potentially our working definition, dynamic definition of who we are. Does it sound like we're wanting to take on that CCI role? Find out what we're currently doing, what the procedures are, what's working, what isn't, diving in, trying to make that a more robust, updated, technologically current method of doing things, and have like that periodic review. I think by us choosing to accept that role, then opens up like, hey, let's have these people come in and teach us what the current role is. Because if we're not going to do it, we're eventually not going to have that in our definition. I feel like we're kind of like wasting time. But if we all agree, yes, let's add that to the definition, let's move forward, this is the direction, then at least we can put that on the board and add it to something that we want to include in our definition as a group. But I don't know.
And to a certain extent, depending on who you talk to, we've already got it. It's just, it's instead of being stated clearly in our mandate, it's alluded to. Because point 1 in our mandate is that the CAC is responsible for the citizen involvement program, period.
Right.
The definitions of that is what leads us down this whole rabbit hole. So clarifying that language and elaborating on that a bit is probably going to get you in the direction where I think you want to go.
Well, right now, I'm just hoping that, like, I don't know, I guess like it's a buy-in thing and a direction. It's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's vote on it. We're taking this on. Put it on the board. We're putting it in the minutes. It's ours. We own it. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's just
It's very
silly, but
the approach that we, had historically. So I think, I mean, I do think we need to have like buy-in is that our understanding of the reading, like you said, and the approach we want to go from the group before we kind of about face and.
I'm certainly I would be in for that, because I mean, frankly, if I'm part of, one of the things that this whole experience has told me is that to a large extent, other than nibbling around the edges of trying to solve individual communications issues, and individuals and staff trying to fix those issues, nobody is really paying attention in any comprehensive sense to our citizen involvement plan program. So somebody should. And I see no reason why it shouldn't be this group. You guys are welcome to tell me I'm not, but
yeah, I mean, I guess, should I move to the CAC to fully embrace and accept the role of the CCI and plan to dive in and do all this? Is that where, am I out of line or what?
well, I think we can
Crazy or-
start working on putting some bullet points in on papers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we don't have that, then.
And I know last meeting, I feel like something you said they volunteered to throw together a little definition. Did I make that up in my head? Did somebody, I was hoping, I feel like Kevin said that. Did you say that last meeting? No.
What was it again? What did I say?
This is letting you just kind of think, you don't remember that, really?
Well, what, you know, what?
Well, I can speak to the note that you had just mentioned. I think what Kevin had offered last meeting was he was looking at the county.
Oh,
And he had mentioned that, hey, if you guys want, I can put this into, Troutdale-ize it. I think that's what he would.
Exactly.
Okay. That was so clever.
And if I may, I guess, my intention here is I think we've got a few things kind of floating that we're trying to pin to the board.
Mhm.
And I think a couple of things that have really come up many times is we want to be able to bring stuff to council. And we should pin that to the board. We want to still hear citizens, hear about chickens, hear about whatever, let's pin that to the board. And then the question, I guess, is even though we're tasked with it, we can keep it a status quo and forget about it. We ever had this conversation, move along. Or we could say, hey, here's an opportunity to really grab this thing and own it. So we want to pin that one to the board.
Start seeing pretty data about how many people showed up to the meeting.
I'd
How
say,
many emails we
yep,
received,
yeah,
about which subject.
all of it. Viewed clicks, everything, all of it. What is the timeline? How many are we sending out on a month on mailers? Why are we not using the backside of our water bills to print stuff on? I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that we could do. So that just opens up a whole box of opportunities, and ideas, and that's probably part of our regular meeting or regular updates to that plan, that comprehensive community involvement plan
But
that we manage.
speaking, do we say, this is what we want to do? Or do we say, hey, let's talk about these things, and what's the appropriate mechanism, I guess, or strategy to how we want to address this with council? I don't know.
I might suggest we go with the comprehensive plan that we put together and say, look, this is what the work we've done, here's where we're at. This is, or I guess maybe along the way, try to get some buy-in from talking with council and say, this is what we're doing, but kind of showing up and saying, this is what we put together and this is our plan for community involvement. We've organized it, compiled it, organized it, update it, and we're gonna own it, and we're gonna periodically review it. And it's gonna be done this month of every year, put it on the calendar. We want you guys to approve this. And I think if we show up strong and we're organized and we make clear, concise presentation, I don't believe there's any reason why anyone would say no.
Ready?
I just think it's a work in progress. That's what we're saying. You know, we don't know yet. So we're gonna just start measuring, gathering, wow, that's not a good statistic, or that's a great one, but now we need to try to capture that. Or technology changes, and we, you know, this is another way to. Who knows, whatever we figure out, but it's a continuing working progress, trying to keep engaged people in the process. Yeah, I think it's okay. I don't know. No, no. I'm kidding. I think it sounds exciting.
And I would be fine with taking a first stab at essentially rewriting those purpose bullet, or taking a revision of those bullet points as far as, what would go into an ordinance. And sort of expanding and clarifying those. I would be willing to take that on myself. And then I can bring that back and just sort of get and then we can talk through those as a discussion point next month.
Sounds good.
I second the motion for Adrian to chase that.
All yours. That's great. Okay, so for next month, we will take a look at that draft. And then any other information that you think would be good for us to look at for next month also. Or requests. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about.
Oh, I'm
maybe
sure.
for that.
Yeah.
That might be plenty. And help us lead us to next steps of what kind of that baseline information. Now that we're all in, plan.
Oh, I've already been thinking about steps 3 and 4, so yeah.
That's good.
So once we get them, once we got numbers and how do we get, names and contact information, how we start, Will spoke at this planning committee meeting back in June. Did we reach out to him and see if we get him to come in and talk about a similar issue? Is there any outreach going on? And then how can we pull him to join a committee? So on and so forth. And
There's a multi-level marketing, this thing's gonna get so big. Everybody's gonna.
So we'll need friends.
I still want my digital board outside that says planning committee tonight, and then
Yeah.
has one of the issues, and then come on, you're invited, there's the council meeting. Because we talked about that with Chris, and it's just like, it's a different thing that people can know, this is happening, and you're invited to. Because it's really sad after COVID, and we lost East Metro Media, we lost the newspaper. The newspaper, they don't come here anymore to the council meetings. I'm not saying that there's not accountability, but things have been changing. People aren't showing up here like they used to. I mean, it's a really sad that time of people getting disconnected and not being involved. And so it's really important to gather their interests, know that we see them, they matter, we want to hear from them, and it's all of us. And I don't like the direction that's going.
Yeah. And following on from that, one of the things that I know is critical as far as communication back from the city to the public, as far as like how things work and communicating the process is in recent months, years, communicating to the citizenry the extent to which in a lot of cases our hands are tied and why. In cases where they don't necessarily like the direction that things are going, but in practice, we can't do anything about it. And the public needs to know that we can't do anything about it and why.
Is that what you're talking
Well,
about?
because of time frame or because Salem has tied our hands.
because we didn't object to it 3-4 years ago.
Or because it just, as far as the legislature is concerned, other, well, Portland or Bend or whoever is, holds more weight. I mean, that's, for whatever the reason, in cases where we are beholden to another group as a city, the public needs to know, or at least part of our role, part of the city's responsibility in communicating effectively why things are happening the way that they're happening, is communicating the extent to which we don't have a choice.
We do legislature update, Chris Worthing and, Zach. Maybe part of that communication is, we ask them quarterly, what are you working on?
Yeah,
And then we put their contact information. And
Yeah.
you do what I mean, so.
yeah, absolutely. But it's,
Too bad we can't tell them what they should be working on, or give them opinions.
Both of them are open to communication. Zach Hudson did a lot of First Fridays last year, where he said, come ask me, it said ask me, or something like that. Chris Orsick, I know my husband calls him, and he, well, his people. And it's talking to people, it's talking to Chris. I'm not saying everybody always agrees with them or whatever, but I'm saying they are open to communication. So, it's not bad to just for us to know regionally what's going on, what are they working on? And then that way our residents can have the option to choose to communicate with them. We can put their contact information as well. And then they have that option, too.
but sorry, which one quick thing, because like another good example is, I can't tell you how much of, through the various other people that live, my neighbors on 4th Street, that I've gone through the history, at least the extent to which I know it, of the whole Home Forward thing. And trying to, and explaining to how all of that happened, and the extent to which, Troutdale tried to get and has generally gotten the best deal that they could, but to a certain extent, hands are tied, and explaining that to people who have recently moved in, who weren't around to be involved for that whole process, but are still interested parties, because the rest of the time does impact them. So communicating those things, for good or ill, whether, it is something we wanted to happen or didn't want to happen, but that's part of communication that I think is lacking to the public as a whole, is the why.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the discussion on this, so that we can move to the next agenda and keep up on time. And so, staff communication.
Just a couple of things. Just want to remind everybody, speaking of communication, that next week is Planning Commission. We have two different projects. One is a special variance request. That's type 3 quasi judicial request for an addition that the applicant had built and was brought to us by code compliance. And then the other is a type 4 legislative code amendment, which is a kind of it's to close out the grant for the Main Streets on Halsey project that was started in 2001. Or actually 2017, and the amendments were suggested in 2001. So those are both going to Planning Commission next week. So those it'll be a longer meeting, pretty good sized packet. And then what was the other thing? There was something. For the trail going underneath the railroad, it sounds like now we have 90% approval from the railroad. So we're almost there. We had originally, the specs were as they originally, we've been working with them to get that section of trail built. Our consultant has submitted the application on the city's behalf for the development. It was immediately brought to our attention by the railroad that they did not have 100% sign off, so we had to withdraw the application and work with the railroad in order to get their sign off prior to submitting, so we can do the development. So once we get 100% sign off, we'll then bring that application back and go through the type 2 process that it will take. I believe it's a type 2 process.
You know what changes they asked for?
Yeah, basically, from what I understand, it's not my project, it's Nick's project. We do speak about it quite a bit, and also Erica, our director, has been the one doing a lot of the communication with the railroad. They were looking, what they didn't like about the original plans and what they requested, and which we're working with them on, is basically a kind of netting to cover the trail that goes underneath. We wanted to, originally, we didn't really want that. Yeah, aesthetics wise, wanted it to be open. As far as liability for the railroad, anything falls, anything drops, anything like that, they want to be protected. So it's a protective netting that is a bit longer than what we had hoped for, but if that's what they need, then we have to go with it, because it's kind of a make or break deal with that.
So it's not like to prevent the rocks from falling or anything like that, it's from debris or something?
Debris, rocks, kind of it's kind of like a big dome kind of tunnel.
Yeah.
That's going to be a mesh netting to protect from debris. If some rocks get kicked off, rocks fall, things of that nature, it'll protect pedestrians that are walking in that section.
So it's gonna be small square netting.
I believe so. I haven't looked at the plan, so I'm not entirely sure.
It would have to be.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
depending on what is going through the freight corridor,
Mhm.
God only knows what sort of garbage can get knocked off of those train cars.
And what speed too, right?
Exactly. And that was the concern of the railroad.
Is it gonna be lit down there?
Not sure.
When I think of a tunnel now, I think of it being, not bright.
I don't believe so. Yeah, I'm not entirely, I don't believe so, 'cause it's still going to be mesh. Just like most of our trails, park, they close at a specific time. Moving forward on, the depot, redesign the depot and trail system, so that's something Marley's been working with. I'm not sure if I'm sure those of you who are on TCAB have heard about that. Or if not, will be. It's just, that's been a grant we've been working with the county on some redesign and connecting the trails there as well. So those are kind of some of the bigger projects and current projects that we have going on. Also, next week's planning commission meeting, the planning commission will be continuing the discussion on the CFEC rules. So that's the climate equitable community friendly communities. So that is, if you don't know, the last couple meetings, it's been discussed with planning commission. It's a regulation that came down from the state that we have to amend our parking requirements. We got an extension, so it has to be adopted by June of 2025. So that's going to be at planning commission for several work sessions and continued discussion to work through what's required by the city and which options the city will pick in order to move forward with the code amendment.
The big, correct me if I'm wrong, the sticking point, one of the sticking points of that is the number of parking spaces, is that right?
There's several.
It's complicated.
It's very complex. I think I sent the CFEC presentation out to everybody after the last meeting. I think I had done that. Okay, yeah. That Erica had presented at the planning commission meeting prior to our last. It's very complex, but it does revolve around parking, reducing parking, a tax on parking for if we say we were to have a commercial parking, which we don't. This is an option that staff's kind of trying to leading towards, because we don't have an area that's fitted for commercial parking garage. But just because we don't have it doesn't mean we can't opt for that option of putting a tax on, a pay for parking type parking garage. So things like that, it's an interesting document, that was passed down to us. It's a lot of work. And planning commissions had a lot of discussion and a lot of, questions, as they should, on behalf of the citizens.
The code compliance edition, is that basically they're coming in asking for a retroactive variance?
Correct. Yes. The addition has already been built. It was brought to our attention via code compliance. It is built within the rear setback. And so that is why they requested a special variance.
Is it residential, consumer?
Residential. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for that, Dave.
You're very welcome.
Right, let's move to committee comments, and then I will start with you, Diane, and we'll just make our way around.
Okay, I wanna thank, all the planning for working on that, railroad. That's huge. I hope you have a nice party after that goes 100% through. I know that's
Maybe the
been
plan.
amazing working.
I'd like to.
Congratulations, Kyla, and to Kevin. I was married with my dad. We had a lovely funeral. Everything went well, and in North Carolina, that's very good. I'm still concerned about the graffiti on the Troutdale Bridge. Again, that's one of the states. It's the first owned truss bridge in all of Oregon. So to me, it's kind of like a Oregon monument. And both sides have graffiti on it. I know part of the county to take care of that. I don't know if we can deal with that in-house in Troutdale. My comment is, when that does get done, I hope that gets done soon, so because summer's coming, and then it will just encourage more graffiti because they're adding other obnoxious, disgusting things to it. But as an artist, I'm willing to learn how to do that when they do come and do that. Maybe a few of us, other artists or whoever wants to, can learn how to do that. So maybe we can be part of cleaning up graffiti if that's just, we're down on the list for Multnomah County for graffiti. I see that issue in Portland. It's very sad, but I hope we can resolve that soon. Here in Charlotte, I don't want to encourage more of that, especially with the summer coming in. Tons of people hanging out at the water. And I'm concerned about the parking. I don't know, you said that's a state thing that is that?
Yes.
And then you said June 2025?
June 2025.
And then
We
you have to
were
adopt a new code.
code amendments to our existing code.
How much are
Yes.
they asking right now that they do? Are they talking a reduction number, or are they just saying you must do less than what your code is at this time? What is the ask at this point? Are they gonna?
There's options that we can pick from. We must pick two. If we take option number 2, we have to pick 2 out of 5, I believe. I think, Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, so I know you've been involved in those discussions. And so the range, a lot of cities have taken option 1, which is a complete reduction in parking requirements. Basically 0 parking requirements if you're within as a crow flies half mile from a frequent stop public transit. I believe that was option A, and then option B is you have to select 2 out of 5 options. 1 is a tax on a commercial parking facility. Another one is required is a rent a space, like, so say you have an apartment complex, you can then, on top of the lease for the rent that you're renting the unit, you would rent a parking space.
Unbundling.
It's the
Thank you,
unbundling
correct.
thing, yeah.
That was the term. So there's kind of there's a variety of options,
And it's a
and
must?
Must. Yep.
Troutdale participated in a lawsuit against the state of Oregon.
along with 8 other cities.
8 other cities to say, this is, well, in the vernacular, ridiculous. To make us, where Troutdale is not like Eugene and Portland and other bigger cities, and some of our geographic issues, hills and so on, would make that compliance very difficult. We lost. So we must comply, and so now it is strictly a matter of picking which one is going to best suit the citizens of Troutdale.
Okay, so that were small cities exempt the,
I believe it was under 10,000.
and how many are we? We're like 17 now?
17, yeah.
Okay,
We're not exempt.
it'll be Troutdale Lake, Troutdale Beach. Just kidding.
North
I
South,
guess
split it.
it's total a lot of laws if you do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right, right. Okay, you know, it's time to get creative.
Or New Troutdale.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I'll talk to Ed Turkey about that one. Okay, thank you for conducting the meeting with Kevin. Thank you for the seating. Thank you.
I do have a couple things. Again, with what it is that we're discussing here, this definition, and now I'm continuing to have my definition evolve to an understanding. Dakota, wouldn't the legislative amendment for the Halsey corridor, as it relates to the Halsey corridor, shouldn't that have been brought to the CAC so that the CAC can review those legislative amendments? Isn't that, now I'm understanding that's part of what the CAC is supposed to do. Also, the parking issues, the CAC, rather than just sort of hearsay, shouldn't those issues really be brought in detail to the CAC for review and recommendation and comment, as well as distribution to the public, so we get the public's input?
I think comment, yes. I don't know about recommendation. I think that's something that is more of a planning, that's more in the planning commission realm. But definitely comment, like, so let me start with the matrix on Halsey. That was, it was initially between the three cities of Troutdale, Fairview, and Wood Village. Joint planning commission meetings to discuss that, and there was a consultant that was doing a code audit, looking at it and looking at how they can implement different standards to improve development and walkability, all these factors. Fairview and Wood Village adopted those after multiple work sessions with joint planning commissions and then planning commission.
Excuse me. I'm not looking for detailed information about, I'm looking for procedural.
And that's what I'm getting at, is that it was at a higher level with planning commission with the work sessions. And I think the feedback, especially as of late, that we've received from planning commission is that, oh, we don't like we don't agree with this. This isn't something that we think is best for the city, these amendments, which staff agrees with. And I think our goal is we have to do this in order to close out the grant. But what we would like to do is bring it back with not that part, but bring back similar code amendments and maybe get public opinion on them that wasn't necessarily gathered the first roundabout. And I think doing something as in, hey, bringing that here as a staff communication and receiving feedback from the CAC prior to holding a work session with planning commission. That's something that we as staff believe could be very useful and helpful. So to answer your question is recommendation, maybe not as much, maybe a little bit, especially now, but before they didn't have it. Moving forward with something like that, getting the feedback of the citizens for something that's going to have an effect on the citizens is something that staff
Like parking.
So that's something that staff would like to move forward with. I think right now for the CFEC information, that is holding work sessions and getting an understanding of where planning commission wants to go, and then taking that before coming up with any of the code amendments and bringing that to CAC to inform and receive comments. And maybe we tweak it here, maybe we tweak it here, back to planning commission for a work session, and then moving forward with a code amendment. So I think that's how staff is looking at doing it now, because that hasn't been done in the past. So I think that's something with code amendments like that. Not all code amendments necessarily have to, but.
Evolving understanding of creating role is, I think that would help. The other thing I want to mention, thank you. The other thing I want to mention is that my being a commissioner on the planning commission, I brought to last month's planning commission the fact that the CAC is undergoing this new kind of evolving definition or redefinition of what our role is. And I will say that the response was surprise. Almost as if they didn't even know that the CAC was supposed to be involved in this kind of review and comment. And because the comment that I got back was, well, we're trying to let the public know what's going on with the planning commission and so on. So I think that there needs to be a stronger interface. I'm certainly willing to do that, obviously being on both committees. But I still think there needs to be a stronger bond, stronger link of communication between the two committees, so that the planning commission is understanding where we fit in that process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone for being here tonight. Dakota, what you just mentioned there about the community development department, planning, wanting to be more involved. I love hearing that. That's be super exciting. I also know you guys, based on last month's meeting, have been diving in, looking at updates, looking for ways to improve. To me, to hear that, that's awesome. So, really encouraging. I do want to maybe restate something that I mentioned earlier and maybe give us a different game plan for city council and whatnot. Maybe what we should consider as our potential game plan for that would be to continue to work on the definition, continuing to tease those things out, bring it all in there so it's an encompassing definition change that then we take to council and say, hey, look, this is what we want to do, change this, and then we've got the role that we are then accepting it, changing the role, this is new, then we go about the next month's meeting after that, living up to the definition that we created. So maybe that could be a potential focus for us for next month, is to finalize that definition through Adrian's help and bringing in things like that, continuing this discussion and really defining that well. And then maybe we consider then taking that to council as hey, here's our citizen involvement plan that we're bringing to you. This is our new role, and this is what we'd like you guys to adopt. And then once that's done, then maybe we move forward with having plan, gathering all that data, doing those things. But it's just an idea, maybe something we can add for the agenda next month. And then I mentioned this pre-meeting, but now since we're on recorded, at some point in the future, if we ever have time, I would love to learn more about our municipal court here in Troutdale. And if we do end up finding time, because I feel like this is a pretty meaty thing that we're going to get into, take a few months. If we ever get that slow down, maybe you guys could help remind me that, hey, let's throw that on there and see if we can get a presentation. So again, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you guys' involvement today. It's really productive and look forward to next month. So thank you.
It's wonderful discussion. Thank you, everybody, for humoring my long-windedness on occasion, but it is I'm very valuable opinions and points of view from everybody, which is I think the fact that we have all of these variable points of view and the inevitable inputs from multiple committees, because a number of us are on multiple committees. Having all of those different inputs and points of view, I think, is so valuable to just the discussion and making all of this work and making the what we actually produce and the recommendations that we make that much better for the people that we're trying to take care of. So yeah, wonderful discussion, wonderful input, and hopefully I'll be able to bring something plausible back next month that we can chew on.
I guess I would say, I would agree, we have a good discussion. I'm excited to see this committee is going, and I just wanted to ask for clarification. I think I missed some of the discussion, Kevin just had about the comments, recommendations, so because our description says to make recommendations, recommendation council, so I'm just trying to understand.
I think I misspoke in the sense of, I think comments are considered a recommendation. Because it wouldn't be necessarily like where planning commission makes a recommendation to, and then say in a code amendment, they make a recommendation, we go back, we change it. But they could also have a recommendation like, hey, this was, bring it forward to them for at a work session. That this was recommended that it be written this way by CAC. Planning commission can either take or not, and then move forward with that. But I think I misspoke as far as comments and can also be recommendations to planning commission and council. So I think I misspoke on that.
Okay, I guess maybe. Because I was trying to understand, that wasn't my recommendation, since the past, it felt more formal, like council would say, hey, it's a recommendation on this, then you got a discussion about our recommendation, and then obviously the council, and they would do whatever they do.
And I think this is slightly different than that, because that's an action that was handed to you from where they're looking for a direct recommendation from this committee. Where for the code amendments, for example, we'd like to bring it for comments and recommendations to go to planning commission for planning commission and then discuss at a work session. Give the feedback to staff, and then we would move forward with writing the code amendment. So we wanted to start here rather than have something that was handed to you from city council looking for a specific recommendation. Where it's more, hey, this is what we're thinking as staff before it even gets back to planning commission. For that we can put that in to our information for planning commission as a recommendation from or from CAC. So it's just a kind of a slightly different procedural thing is how I guess I would explain that. Yep.
This question, I did see it.
I'm not sure. I think I think that might be Public Works who handles that.
Yeah.
There was something that said that look for it and then the details in the next page, something was, yeah.
Okay, and then otherwise. Thank you to Sandy.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate seeing everybody. The first thing is that's pretty awesome. So really enjoyed that and a lot of good discussion. Thanks for letting me be a part.
Great. Well, thank you guys. Wonderful meeting, good discussion. Glad to see you in person. Yes, Will.
Did we have any last public comment possibly at all? Did we miss anyone? I think I forgot to think about that too.
Thank you. Any last comment from the public? Anybody on Zoom?
Hi, Twyla, it's Paul Wilcox.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
I wanted to follow up on some announcements that Dakota made. The staff report for the next planning commission meeting is posted online. I think you'd find it all very interesting, to say the least. It's going to be a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was that? Can somebody repeat that?
I could repeat for him. The staff report for next week's planning commission meeting has been posted online. And Paul recommended that everybody take a look. It's going to be an interesting one. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
That's regarding.
Regarding the code amendment for Main Streets on Halsey and the type 3 very special variants.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Yeah. Anybody you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Makes your comments.
Do you have any?
I think I have a Susie.
Okay. I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
In favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you guys. Have a wonderful evening.